Welcome everyone, Christine here with the discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires to talk about the races with the best Legendary Lord rosters in the game at the moment. Of course, the Cast Dwarves that are going to be coming out in just 2 weeks or so are going to have their own Legendary Lord roster. We'll see how they end up being in a campaign. Based on what we've seen, they are good, but they also aren't like Champions of Chaos level. I think you're going to have your work cut out for you in a Castdorf campaign. I could be wrong, they could be ridiculously powerful, but we just don't know. We actually don't really know the Lord effects and the faction effects for them. But anyway, for this particular list, let's start at number 5 with the Greenskins. The Greenskins are certainly a really powerful race, have a lot of benefits to their economy, to their units, have a lot of things going for them. Their Legendary Lord roster does include some powerhouses. Grimgor, who has a benefit to Black Orcs, Black Orc Big Bosses, campaign movement range, upkeep benefits, and a significant duelist ability. So Grimgor is actually one of the best duelists in the game in a 1v1 fight. He can handle pretty much everyone else except someone like Malice Darkblade or some large entities like Scarbrand or Kolic. But when you're dealing with those kind of large entities, the answer to that is mass range power will kill those pretty quickly. In many cases, though not all cases. Then you have Grom the Paunch, who is one of the most powerful Legendary Lords in the entire game. Has kind of a bad starting position, but has a ridiculous economy, significant power through his Cauldron, which buffs up all of his armies. His ranged units can be actually some of the best in the game, with either an anti-infantry benefit really helping out, or explosive ammunition, which is also very substantial, among many other benefits that you do get in Grom's campaign. A bit of a limited campaign, but certainly a great deal of power. And then Azag the Slaughterer, who certainly isn't on the same level of Grimgor or Grom, but is still a pretty powerful Legendary Lord, has a lot of terrain types available for him, can easily conquer the entirety of the Empire, can make diplomatic dealings, especially the vampires, though not just with the vampires, but really his campaign has a lot of versatility to it, and you certainly won't regret playing with a Legendary Lord that has a flying monster as a mount. Now, unfortunately for the Greenskins, Skarsnik and Warzag are just kind of lackluster. Well, Warzag is great with his own army because of all the benefits he gets for Savage Orcs, but outside of that, he's kind of playing as a generic Legendary Lord for the Greenskins, which certainly isn't a bad situation at all, given the fact that the Greenskins are a really powerful race, but it isn't necessarily the best situation in the world. Then you have Skarsnik. Yes, he does have a major upkeep benefit for Goblin units, which is very substantial. You certainly will be able to recruit a lot of those in your campaign. Unfortunately, however, you can't recruit Orc units unless you're recruiting them from Caracade Peaks, and that's really going to put significant limits on your recruitment of those kind of units. And here's the thing, Goblin units are amazing in the early game, where much of the challenge of a campaign comes from, but later on, you don't want to use them necessarily as much. You might want to switch to Black Orcs or Big Guns, certainly a lot of Trolls and all kinds of other units, and you might want to get rid of your Goblin Archers and Nasty Skulkers. One of the things I've learned in Greenskin campaigns is that while those units are really good in the early game, they don't necessarily, they can't necessarily handle some of the really end game stuff, and may end up either taking significant casualties in battle. So not having Orc units or having them in a very limited capacity will hurt your campaign. So 3 great Legendary Lords, 2 mediocre ones. That's how I would describe the Greenskins. We then move on to the Dark Elves. And I feel the Dark Elves are one of those races a lot of people just dislike. I think part of that may be due to what Legend of Total War ended up doing when it came to covering the Dark Elves when Warhammer 3 came out, and other people as well. Certainly, people that like the Dark Elves in Warhammer 2 don't like the changes that came to the slave mechanic for them, but the Dark Elves are a powerful race. They have great replenishment, they have good units, they have a good economy. You can earn a ridiculous amount of money as long as you keep the slaves flowing. In terms of Legendary Lords, Malekith, although he has a really hard campaign starting position between the enemies and just the terrain of it creating problems, he does have a major upkeep benefit for Dark Shards in particular being very beneficial, a good skill line, and a good amount of combat power. Marathi, though, steals the show as far as I'm concerned with the Dark Elves. Her Slaaneshi corruption gives her a major income benefit, and she's the empire builder for the Dark Elves. She can make the most powerful empire for the entirety of the Dark Elves. Like, if you want to play a Dark Elven campaign where you conquer the world, Morathi is your best choice. Hellebrand, pretty mediocre, decent enough, I suppose, but her campaign mechanics are not necessarily anything special. Her combat ability isn't necessarily the best. I mean, she will work, all Dark Elven Legendary Lords will work, but pretty mediocre as a Legendary Lord. Lokir is very much an early game aggressor, I would describe him as. While he doesn't have the same kind of empire building capability that Morathi has, certainly because he doesn't have Slaaneshi corruption, which helps a lot with slaves and the slave economy, and in particular with controlling our provinces. Lokir has significant benefits to Black Arcs, which can be really good to have a lot of those in the campaign because they have a major upkeep benefit. And on top of that, he gets major benefits to Black Arc Corsairs. He also has a right that is absolutely ridiculous that only he has access to. He is the kind of Legendary Lord which is really, really good in the early game, though not necessarily as great in the mid game or the late game. So Morathi is better for a massive empire, Lokir is better for a shorter campaign. Pretty substantial combat ability for him as well, though. And then, of course, one of the most fearsome Legendary Lords in the game when it comes to just sheer combat potential, you have Malus Darkblade. Now, Malus doesn't necessarily have the best benefits when you're looking at it, but he does get a major growth benefit. You have a choice. You can either have him possessed or not possessed. If he's possessed, he's insane in battle, but if he's not possessed, you get a major control benefit, corruption benefit, which really helps out with his starting position in the Northern Castaways. So he can conquer the entirety of the Northern Castaways. He can be the most powerful faction over there. No one really can oppose him, with the exception of like Archeon and later on Sigvald and Valkia, but he will beat those fairly easily in his campaign, not too many problems. And while he doesn't have the ability to recruit as many Black Arcs as Lokir, he's the only other Legendary Lord of the Dark Elves that does start with that. And then finally you have Rakarth. I mean, Rakarth is focused on the monstrous units of the Dark Elves. He's decent, but the problem with those monstrous units, while they're great and he does get the ability of recruiting them after every battle, I would say monster units for Dark Elves is not really where the campaign focus is right now. He is good, he's decent, but not incredible. So you have 4 great Legendary Lords, 1 mediocre one, and one that's okay, but not especially great, I would say, given the campaign playstyle of the Dark Elves. We move on to the High Elves. Now, the High Elves are a ridiculously powerful race. Though, while the Dark Elves are focused on early game aggression and expansion, the High Elves are a bit slower, but they certainly have a better empire building situation because they don't depend on slaves. They instead depend on trade in order to keep their economy going. For Legendary Lords roster, there isn't any bad choice over here with the exception of Teclis. Like, I could go into the details, like Tyrion's major combat ability, Leifenar's insane campaign ability to just move around the campaign in the fall movement stance being an ambush stance, and of course being able to use the underway. Alfarian's entire campaign mechanics, really, his Mistwalker units, his ability to steal a portion of a faction's income and get very, very rich for his campaign. Though certainly a difficult campaign when it comes down to it, but still a ridiculous amount of power. Alariel, who can recruit Shriekin units in her campaign, so she already will have a really powerful ranged army. She has access to the Sisters of Avalorn, far easier than the other Legendary Lords of the High Elves, but she also has all the Wood Spirit units from the Wood Elves. So you combine a really powerful empire that by default, like a really powerful race by default, with some of the most powerful melee units in the entire game, and you also get access to hand maintenance far easier in her campaign, and it gets a bit ridiculous. She starts out a bit weak, and I think Alariel in a lot of ways is the ultimate expression of how High Elves are, in the sense she starts out weak, she has a slower early game, but once she gets going, she gets going. Teclis, he's isolated, he's on his own, he does have a lot of magical ability, but being on his own will have significant drawbacks in his campaign. Not weak, none of these guys are weak, but being isolated is a major problem, so I would say he's mediocre. And then of course Imric, really powerful in battle, but his campaign benefits aren't great. His Lord benefits are, however, superb. The dragons he can get throughout the campaign give him a lot of power, but he also starts with a very slow early game, and his campaign situation in Darklands is complicated. So, of the 6 legendary lords of the High Elves, I would say 4 of them have really good campaigns, some slower than others, but all of them really, really good campaigns. Lots of power, lots of potential, and 2 of them are basically mediocre legendary lords. Well, not mediocre in the sense of their combat ability or campaign ability even, but rather their start positions really limit their potential. The potential is there, however, if you're willing to play for these campaigns and endure the grueling early game that they have, and specifically Teclis and Imric, especially Imric, I would argue. Then, at number 2, we move on to Skaven. Skaven are an exceptional race in a lot of ways when it comes to their legendary lords. They basically only have 2 generic legendary lords with Queek and Tretch, and both Queek and Tretch play in very different ways as well. Different starting positions, different campaign mechanics. Like Tretch really will benefit from doing a lot once he declares war, because he gets all of these benefits when he declares war for 3 turns. So Tretch is the kind of legendary lord that really benefits from picking his battles, picking when he's going to start the war, whereas Queek is just a steamroller by default. He does get a major benefit to clan rats and storm vermin. He does get that hero capacity for chieftains, though he does have some downsides as well in his special skill line. Still, certainly one of the best melee legendary lords in the game. What's interesting, though, about the Skaven, and this is why they're so high up on the list, is all the other legendary lords for the Skaven have very unique campaign mechanics and playstyles. So, like, Skrull has a focus on plagues. Yes, it's limited, but there is potential when it comes to that, and he focuses on the plagued army of the Skaven. Claw focuses on the weapon teams, the Rattling Gunners, the Jezzails, and just weapon teams in general. So, you know, Globadiers, Bombardiers, Poison Wind Mortars. And he can improve those units faction-wide by quite a significant amount. Deathmaster Snitch focuses on the ninja style of the Skaven, really focusing on Gutter Runners, Night Runners, giving those guys armor-piercing benefits. Like, you would want to use those units in every Skaven campaign, with one major exception, because they're really the best and most cost-effective army, but Snitch really makes that work in an exceptional manner. He also doesn't have to deal with loyalty, and he does have just the ability of completely eliminating a legendary lord from an opposing faction with one of his schemes. So a ridiculous amount of power when we're looking at Snitch, the best Skaven campaign by far. And then you also have Front on Clean, a bit of a shitty, no, it's not a bit, it's a really shitty starting position. But he does have a ridiculous amount of unit customization for every unit in his army. To a degree you don't see in any other legendary lord in the rest of the game. He has a decent amount of combat power, he focuses on the monstrous units. And this is really what should be highlighted with the Skaven, is that you are going to get fairly unique campaigns when you're playing these legendary lords, especially the DLC ones, the free DLC ones, Claw, Snitch, and Front. Certainly Queek, Skrulk, and Tretch, to a lesser extent, do have their own unique campaigns. Tretch really suffers from his starting position, hurting him a great deal, and his potential as a legendary lord not being as great as all the others. But basically, Tretch is the only one that you could call mediocre. All the other ones are pretty good. Like, Skrulk has an immense amount of campaign potential, but all of them do. Though, to be clear, Skrulk just can dominate the entirety of Lustria in his campaign. And then finally, at number 1, we get into the Warriors of Chaos. I don't think I need to go into too many details when it comes to that. Every single one of these legendary lords is a powerhouse. One of the rules I impose on this channel is I try, and when I'm doing these kind of lists, let's say I'm ranking the best legendary lords in the game, I try not having more than one legendary lord for each race, because if I didn't do something like that, then those lists would just be dominated by Warriors of Chaos. All of these guys are substantial in one way or another. Archaon probably has the best empire building capability of any race, of any legendary lord in the entire game, because of the research benefit, the diplomatic relations benefit, the souls benefit. He is absolutely ridiculous. A bit of a slow start, but significant benefits. Kolek is a monster in battle and can vassalize Grimgor very quickly, and Grimgor is one of those legendary lords, even as a vassal, that can capture vast swaths of territory for you. So he's a very, very useful vassal to have in your campaign. So Kolic has that going for him beyond his own campaign benefits. Sigvald, he's an undivided legendary lord, though with certainly with a penchant for Slaanesh. So he starts with some benefits when it comes to Slaanesh. He focuses on Slaanesh, and while Slaanesh isn't necessarily the best Chaos God to focus on, Sigvald is pretty insane when you see him in battle and on the campaign map. In point of fact, when controlled by the AI, Sigvald is the only legendary lord of the Warriors of Chaos who makes a vast and powerful empire that is difficult to defeat. Then you get Be'lakor as the final undivided legendary lord of Chaos. Be'lakor has a lot of benefits in his early game, slower end game than others over here, but certainly a significant number of benefits, a lot of campaign flexibility, a great deal of combat power, and really a really fun campaign because you have so many potential possibilities over there. Then you have the dedicated gods, Festus starting in the Empire, Zazel starting in Kislev Village, starting against Cafe. Like, all of these are good. Like Azazel focusing on the seductive influence aspect of Slaanesh, Festus having all the plagues of Nurgle, Village having a minor version of the Changer of Ways, but barrier on units and an absolute absurd combat ability as well. You might not be able to really kill him once he gets going. And then Valkia, who has the fastest campaign in the entire game, if you decide to play it because of the campaign movement range benefits and just their campaign mechanics in general. Also, she can vassalize Malekith, Helebron, and Grond very quickly in her campaign and create an unstoppable empire within like 10, 20 turns or so. I mean, all of these guys can do it, but I think Valkia is just a bit absurd when it comes to really early game aggression. So those are the best races with the best legendary lord rosters. Let me know what you guys think about this list. Let me know if you thought I should have included another race when it came to this video. Quasine here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and I'll see you boys and girls next time.